Here's a small experiment. Think about the last thing you really wanted, badly. A phone, a job, a person, a number in a bank account. Now remember the moment you actually got it. How long did the happiness last? Be honest. Not the story you tell, the real answer. For most people, it's shockingly short. A day, an hour. Sometimes the satisfaction is already leaking out before you've even finished celebrating, because some new want has quietly appeared behind the old one. You got the thing, and almost immediately you started reaching for the next thing. We treat this like a personal flaw, like if we were just a little more grateful, a little more disciplined, we'd finally feel full. But there was a man who looked at this exact pattern, this endless, restless, never satisfied wanting, and said something that should stop you cold. He said, "This isn't a flaw in you. This is the deepest truth about everything that exists. The wanting that never ends isn't a bug in your psychology. It's the engine of the entire universe, and you are just one small place where it happens to be screaming." His name was Arthur Schopenhauer, and I'll tell you up front, this is the philosopher I have the most complicated relationship with on this whole channel, because he's half right in a way that's genuinely terrifying, and half wrong in a way I want to fight him about. It's the closest thing philosophy has to a love-hate relationship, and by the end of this video, I want you to feel both sides of it. We're going to do this differently this time. I'm not going to save the modern world for the end, because Schopenhauer's ideas aren't a museum piece you look at and then connect to today as an afterthought. They are today. He wrote the operating manual for the exact machine you're probably holding in your hand right now, and he did it in 1818, before electricity, before advertising as we know it, before anyone had ever been engaged by a feed. So, we're going to walk through his philosophy and his world at the same time, because honestly, they turned out to be the same thing. But first, the man, and he's a piece of work. Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Danzig into serious money. His father was one of the wealthiest merchants in the city, and that wealth is going to matter. It's the thing that eventually let Schopenhauer spend his whole life thinking, without ever needing a job. His father died young, possibly by suicide, though that's rumor, not fact. And after that death, Schopenhauer walked away from the merchant path his family had lined up and threw himself into the academic life. First medicine, then philosophy. Now, his mother. You might assume a philosopher this obsessed with the futility of desire had some serene family life. He did not. His relationship with his mother was a disaster. She was a social, intellectually vibrant woman who loved being surrounded by writers and thinkers, and ironically, it was through her literary circle that Schopenhauer got some of his early intellectual connections, but they clashed constantly. And at 30, Schopenhauer cut her off entirely, told her, essentially, never speak to me again, and then lived the rest of his life without seeing or contacting his own mother. Some have tried to trace his notorious hatred of women back to this relationship. I don't think it's that simple, and we'll come back to it later, because there's a much more disturbing explanation buried in his metaphysics. Then there's Hegel. In 1820, Schopenhauer became a lecturer at the University of Berlin, where Hegel was the reigning superstar of German philosophy. And Schopenhauer, seething with what looks a lot like envy, did something petty and revealing. He deliberately scheduled his own lectures for the exact same time as Hegel's. He was going to force the students to choose between them. The students chose Hegel, overwhelmingly. Schopenhauer lectured to a nearly empty room while Hegel's hall overflowed, and it wounded him so badly that he eventually abandoned academia altogether, retreated into the fortune his family left him, and spent the rest of his life as a bitter outsider. Convinced the entire philosophical establishment was too stupid to recognize his genius. And here's the thing I have to be honest about, because the mismatch is impossible to ignore. This is a man who preached a philosophy of self-denial, of quieting your desires, of the ascetic life,
while eating at fine restaurants, attending nice parties, and, in one genuinely dark episode, shoving a woman down a flight of stairs because her chatter outside his door annoyed him. She was injured. He was ordered to pay her for the rest of her life, and when she finally died years later, he wrote a cold little note in his journal amounting to, "The old woman dies, the burden goes." Keep this contradiction in your mind, because it's going to turn out to be either the biggest hole in his philosophy or, in a strange way, its ultimate proof.
Now let's get to the ideas, and to get there, we have to make one quick stop at another philosopher's door. You need one piece of Kant to understand Schopenhauer, and I'll keep it fast. Kant said something unsettling. You never actually experience reality as it truly is. Everything you perceive, this room, this screen, the world, is filtered and constructed by your own mind. Space, time, cause and effect, those aren't features of reality out there. They're the built-in lenses your mind uses to assemble experience. So there's the world as it appears to you, Kant called it phenomenon, and the world as it actually is in itself, which he called the thing in itself, the noumenon. And then Kant slammed a door shut. He said, that real world, the thing in itself, you can never know it. It's permanently sealed off behind your own perception. Don't even try. Philosophy stops here. Schopenhauer looked at that locked door and refused to accept it. He said Kant was brilliant right up until he lost his nerve, because Schopenhauer thought there was a way through. One single crack where you can actually touch the thing in itself. And that crack is your own body. Watch this, because it's the hinge of everything. Think about how you know a car moving down the street. You watch it. You perceive it from the outside as a representation, a picture in your mind. Now think about how you know your own arm moving. It's completely different, isn't it? You don't just watch your arm from the outside like a stranger, you feel it from the inside. You experience the moving directly, without a barrier. So Schopenhauer says, everywhere else in the universe, you're stuck on the outside, seeing only appearances. But in one place, your own body, you get access from both sides at once. From the outside, it's a physical object like any other, but from the inside, you feel what it actually is. And what is it? It's will, wanting, striving, a blind, restless drive. And here's the leap that makes him Schopenhauer. He says, if that's what I am underneath the appearance, pure will, then that must be what everything is underneath. The thing in itself, the reality Kant said we could never touch, is will. Not a person, not a mind, not God. A blind, purposeless, endless wanting that is the inner reality of every single thing that exists. Let me make this concrete, because the universe is will sounds like empty mysticism until you feel what he actually means. Schopenhauer isn't saying the magnet decides to move toward metal or the plant chooses to grow toward light. There's no mind in it, no reason, no plan. That's the whole horror of it. He's saying that underneath the magnet's pull, underneath the plant's growth, underneath the chemical reaction, underneath your hunger and lust and ambition, it's all the same thing. One blind force, expressing itself as everything, wanting for no reason, aimed at no destination. And this is where he breaks violently from everyone around him. His century was drunk on progress. Hegel said history was marching purposefully toward freedom. Everyone wanted the will, the striving, to be going somewhere, up, forward, towards some goal. Schopenhauer said, no, it's going nowhere. There is no goal. The striving doesn't lead to a destination because there is no destination. There's just more striving, forever. Now feel what that means for your life. If your innermost essence is a wanting that has no endpoint, then satisfaction is structurally impossible. You will get the thing, and the wanting will simply move to the next thing, because wanting itself is what you are, not any particular want. He gives us that unforgettable image. A human being is like an animal running inside a wheel, sprinting with everything it has toward a goal it can never reach, and the running never stops until it drops. And now, remember the little experiment we started with. The thing you wanted, the happiness that evaporated. You see it now, don't you? That wasn't your failure. Schopenhauer would say that was you, briefly, catching a glimpse of the deepest law of reality. The dissatisfaction is the truth. Happiness, he says, is never a real positive thing. It's just the momentary silence between two wants, the brief absence of pain before the next craving arrives. We don't move toward pleasure, we move away from suffering, over and over, and call the gaps happiness. And here's where I stop describing him and tell you why this should genuinely disturb you. Because he predicted your entire world. Think about what a social media feed actually is, mechanically, in Schopenhauer's terms. You feel a want, a small, formless restlessness. You open the app to satisfy it. You scroll. You get a hit. And for half a second, the wanting goes quiet. And then it's back, and your thumb is already moving. You never arrive. There's no bottom to the feed, no finish line, no moment where the app says, "You're done now, you're satisfied." It is, quite literally, an infinite wheel built for the running animal Schopenhauer described. The feed is the will made into a product. It doesn't accidentally fail to satisfy you. It is engineered not to, because a satisfied person closes the app. And it goes deeper than the feed. Look at the entire machinery of modern consumer life through his eyes. An economy of billions of dollars built on a single principle: manufacture a want, sell a moment of relief, and make absolutely sure the relief doesn't last. Advertising is the industrialization of Schopenhauer's insight. Its entire job is to keep you in the state of wanting, to make sure the gap between desire and satisfaction never fully closes, because that gap is where all the money is. He looked at human nature and found a bottomless, restless craving. 2 centuries later, we built a $2 trillion industry that runs on that exact discovery, refined to a science, sitting in your pocket, buzzing. Schopenhauer didn't predict the technology. He predicted the wound the technology feeds on. And that is a far more unsettling thing to have gotten right. So the obvious question is there any way out? And here Schopenhauer, the great pessimist, actually offers 2 escape routes. The first one, I love. The second one, I want to argue with him about. The first way out is beauty, art. Schopenhauer thought that in a genuine aesthetic experience, standing in front of a painting, or, above all, listening to music, something extraordinary happens. For a moment, the endless wanting goes silent. When you're truly lost in a piece of music, you're not wanting anything. You're not scheming, not striving, not reaching for the next thing. You've slipped out of the wheel. You stop seeing the world as a set of objects to use and possess, and you just contemplate. You perceive, for once, without desire. This is the piece of Schopenhauer I fully believe. And I'll be honest about why it's personal for me. When I love art, it's never really about the technique. I couldn't tell you much about the brushstrokes or the paint. What grips me is that specific experience. The strange stillness between me and the thing I'm looking at. The moment the usual restless grasping just stops. Schopenhauer gave me a language for that. He said art isn't decoration. It's a temporary escape from the tyranny of wanting. A crack of light where you get to see the world clearly because, for once, you don't want anything from it. But then there's the second exit, and this is where he loses me. Schopenhauer's real solution, the deep one, is to turn against the will itself, to systematically starve it. Want less, need less. Deny the body, deny desire, deny the constant demands of the striving thing inside you until you've quieted it as close to nothing as a living being can get. He took this straight from the Buddhism and Hinduism he loved. He kept a statue of the Buddha on his desk beside a bust of Kant, and he genuinely revered these traditions. Life is suffering. Suffering comes from craving, so kill the craving. Asceticism, renunciation. The saint who wants nothing and therefore suffers nothing. And look, there's real wisdom in that. But here is my problem, and it's a big one. The whole edifice rests on one assumption I don't think Schopenhauer earned. He assumes existence is suffering, that the wanting is essentially painful, that reality is fundamentally something to escape. But watch what his own philosophy does to that claim.
Schopenhauer agreed with a line that runs from the Stoics forward. It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. The world in itself isn't painful or pleasant. The world just is. Whether existence feels like suffering or feels like something else is, in a real sense, an interpretation. And Schopenhauer half knew this. He said, "The world is my representation." He leaned toward the idea, later made famous by Nietzsche, that there are no bare facts, only interpretations.
But if that's true, then catch him in his own trap. His claim that existence is suffering is also just an interpretation. It's his interpretation, a brilliant, bitter, wounded man who cut off his mother and pushed a woman down the stairs and lectured to an empty room while his rival filled halls. That man looked at the exact same universe that others have called joyful or holy or neutral, and he saw suffering. The universe didn't hand him pessimism. He brought the pessimism to the universe. And I try to actually live this correction, so let me be concrete. When something happens and I feel that flash, this is terrible, this is a disaster, I've started catching it in the moment and telling myself, this is my interpretation of an event that in itself is just an event. And sometimes, not always, that tiny move loosens the grip. The pain was never fully in the thing. A lot of it was in the verdict I passed on the thing. Schopenhauer built an entire cathedral of despair, and then, almost against his will, handed us the tool to see that the despair was a choice of lens, not a fact of the world. Which brings us back to that dark contradiction from the beginning. The philosopher of self-denial who couldn't deny himself anything. Here's the fair thing to say. Maybe that's the fatal hole in his philosophy. A man who couldn't live his own prescription, which tells you the prescription might be impossible for humans. Or maybe, in a way he'd hate, it's the ultimate proof of his central idea. Because if even Schopenhauer, the man who understood the tyranny of the will more deeply than anyone, couldn't escape his own wanting, then what better evidence could there be that the will really is this blind, unstoppable force running the whole show? His personal failure might be the truest thing he ever wrote. So this is why it's love and hate for me. He saw the machinery of human dissatisfaction more clearly than almost anyone who ever lived. Clearly enough to describe your feed and your economy and your restlessness 200 years before they took their current shape. That's the love. And then he decided that seeing the machinery meant existence itself was a wound to escape. And I think he mistook his own temperament for the structure of reality. That's the hate. But here's what you can actually walk away with, and it's worth more than the pessimism. He was right that the wanting never stops. He was right that your feed and your whole consumer world are engineered to keep you running in that wheel, and that noticing this is the first step to loosening its grip. He was right that there are moments, in front of real beauty, lost in music, where the grasping goes quiet and you see the world clearly for once. And he accidentally proved that even life is suffering is an interpretation you're allowed to question. So maybe the move isn't to escape the world like he wanted. Maybe it's smaller and harder than that. Notice the wheel you're running in. Step off it, on purpose, more often, into the music, into the thing you love, into the moment you don't want anything. And when the verdict, "This is unbearable," flashes up, remember it came from a lens, and the lens can be changed. Schopenhauer spent his life convinced the universe was screaming. I think he was mostly just listening to himself, but my God, he heard something real in there. And it's still screaming out of the phone in your pocket every single time you reach for it without knowing why. That's the one I'll leave you turning over. Next time on this channel, we take on the man who took Schopenhauer's will, kept the honesty, threw out the despair, and built something wild on top of it. Kierkegaard's neighbor in the storm, and my personal favorite fight, Nietzsche.